It started with laughter. A simple autumn afternoon, golden sunlight falling on rows of orange pumpkins, children running between them, their tiny hands brushing against the vines. It was meant to be a wholesome family video. Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, and their two children, Archie and Lilibet, sharing a rare glimpse of family life in California. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The clip spread like wildfire across social media, sparking admiration from fans who praised its warmth, its intimacy, its authenticity. But then something unexpected happened. A quiet remark from Doria Ragland, Meghan's mother, caught on a live microphone, sent the internet into chaos. What she said, or what she seemed to imply, changed everything. The video appeared ordinary at first. Meghan and Harry dressed casually, smiling, helping the children pick the perfect pumpkins. Doria stood off to the side, watching proudly, holding a paper cup of cider, chatting with someone behind the camera. There was nothing scandalous about it, until viewers replayed a brief moment. In that moment, Doria leaned forward, her voice soft but distinct. "They're such good kids," she said. "Their parents will be proud." It was a small sentence, almost throwaway, but it didn't sit right. Their parents? Why would she say that? The internet froze the clip, enhanced the audio, debated endlessly. Within hours, #BorrowedKids trended on every platform. Was it a slip of the tongue? Or had Doria just confirmed what conspiracy theorists had whispered for years? It's easy to dismiss online rumors, especially when they concern one of the most polarizing couples in the modern world. Meghan and Harry have long walked the tightrope between public fascination and controversy. Every gesture, every photograph, every carefully curated video has been analyzed under a microscope. But this time, something felt different. The moment wasn't orchestrated. It wasn't staged for a camera crew or controlled by a production company. It was raw, unguarded, and unscripted. And that made it dangerous. Because when something slips through the cracks of a polished public image, it often reveals more truth than the entire performance. The footage spread faster than any royal announcement could. News outlets replayed it in slow motion, pausing on Doria's expression. She didn't look nervous or deceitful. She looked casual, genuine, like a woman speaking from habit, not performance. And that, perhaps, was what made it so compelling. People wanted to believe she hadn't meant anything by it. But as the days passed, questions multiplied. Why had Meghan and Harry not addressed it? Why had the video been quietly removed from one platform and re-uploaded with muted audio? Why did the children in the clip look slightly different? That was the spark. But the fire had been smoldering for years. Since the couple's move to California, whispers had followed them. Whispers about birth certificates, missing christening photos, inconsistencies in timelines, and a series of peculiar photographs where children's faces were blurred, swapped, or strangely proportioned. Critics claimed these were signs of digital manipulation. Supporters argued it was privacy. But in an age where privacy and deception can look nearly identical, the line has become dangerously thin. Doria's remark, innocent or not, reopened every old wound. The public's fascination with Meghan and Harry's children had always been intense. They were the first royal children born outside the traditional palace system, the first to be raised in America, the first with the potential to embody both modern independence and royal lineage. But that status came with scrutiny. When Archie was born, the public saw only a few controlled images. No hospital steps, no official christening. Just a series of stylized photographs that revealed more about the Sussex brand than about family life. And when Lilibet came along, the pattern repeated. Mystery, silence, then a photo that felt too perfect, too polished. Over time, people began to notice inconsistencies in size, posture, and even facial features between appearances. But every time questions arose, Meghan's team brushed them aside as hateful speculation, until Doria spoke. Those few words, "Their parents will be proud," landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the fragile narrative Meghan and Harry had built. Analysts began comparing the clip with earlier footage. Digital experts scrutinized facial structures, ear shapes, and shadows. Amateur sleuths dissected the metadata, claiming the video had been shot weeks earlier, not during the publicized family outing. Theories multiplied like wildfire, that the children were doubles, that the footage had been filmed for a project and mislabeled, that Meghan's own mother didn't recognize the children as her biological grandchildren. Sounds absurd. Yet, somehow the pieces began to fit in unsettling ways. But let's pause for a moment. Why does this story matter? Why does one phrase from Doria Ragland ignite such an inferno of attention? It's not just about royal gossip. It's about trust, the thin, fragile thread between what we see and what we believe. When public figures trade in authenticity, when they build empires on relatability and transparency, a single inconsistency becomes an earthquake. The audience feels betrayed. They start to ask, if this is a lie, what else is? And in the world of Meghan and Harry, where image has become currency, that question can destroy everything. The middle of this story, the point where things start to fracture, isn't found in headlines or public statements. It's in silence. Meghan's silence after the clip aired. Doria's silence as journalists swarmed for clarification. Harry's silence, his usual defensiveness nowhere to be found. Instead, their social media channels went dormant. The usual cheerful posts, motivational quotes, and filtered family moments vanished overnight. Something had shifted behind the scenes. Then came the reports, quietly removed videos, edited versions re-uploaded to official platforms, and the sudden reemergence of their PR firm in the media cycle. Damage control was underway. Insiders began speaking, some anonymously, some under the guise of former staff. They described tension, frantic meetings, and a sense of panic. One alleged that Meghan was furious with her mother, accusing her of sabotaging years of reputation management. Another claimed the original footage had been meant for a small circle of donors, not for the public. But someone leaked it, and once it was out, there was no pulling it back. What makes this story especially haunting isn't the rumor itself. It's the way every attempt to suppress it only seemed to confirm it. The harder they tried to bury the clip, the more people believed there was something to hide. The atmosphere online turned electric. Videos analyzing Doria's tone garnered millions of views. Comment sections filled with arguments, some defending Meghan, others convinced the family's entire narrative was collapsing. Experts in linguistics weighed in, saying her phrasing implied detachment. Body language specialists said her relaxed posture suggested she spoke naturally, without realizing the implication. Every frame, every breath became evidence in an invisible trial, and the public loved every second of it. Meanwhile, tabloids pounced. Headlines screamed accusations, blending half-truths with speculation. Some claimed to have inside information from royal aides who hinted that Buckingham Palace had long questioned the authenticity of Meghan's claims about her pregnancies. Others went further, suggesting the palace had evidence but chose silence to avoid international scandal. Whether any of it was true didn't matter. The story had momentum, and once that happens, truth becomes a secondary concern. The narrative takes on a life of its own. As the weeks passed, Doria retreated from the spotlight. Friends described her as shaken and conflicted. Those close to her said she felt cornered, torn between loyalty to her daughter and a growing sense of guilt. Some even suggested she had been warned not to speak publicly again. The clip, though small, had cracked something open, something that couldn't be easily repaired. And in that silence, the world filled in the blanks. Now we reach the turning point, the end of the introduction where curiosity turns to obsession. This isn't just a story about a pumpkin patch video. It's about perception, illusion, and the cost of control. Meghan Markle built her post-royal identity around authenticity, the idea that she was finally free to be herself, a mother, a humanitarian, a storyteller. But what if that story wasn't as organic as it seemed? What if, in crafting the perfect narrative, something real was lost or hidden? The next chapters will dig deeper into that question. They will examine how one family video became the catalyst for one of the most controversial theories in modern celebrity history. We'll trace the timeline, the inconsistencies, the witnesses, and the digital evidence. We'll explore the dynamics between Meghan and Doria, a mother and daughter bound by love, secrets, and perhaps unspoken regret. And finally, we'll confront the haunting possibility that behind every carefully framed photograph lies a truth no filter can disguise. Because in the end, truth isn't loud. It's quiet. It slips out in unguarded moments, in a single sentence whispered without thought. And sometimes, as we've just seen, that's all it takes to unravel everything. The video began like any other carefully orchestrated glimpse into the Sussex family's private world. A soft lens, a warm California breeze, and the quiet hum of distant laughter. The title was simple enough: Family Day at the Pumpkin Patch. Meghan's voice opened the clip, smooth and cheerful, narrating like a home movie. She spoke of simple moments, of gratitude for the little things. For a few seconds, the scene felt genuine. Viewers saw Harry pushing a small wheelbarrow filled with pumpkins, Archie toddling behind in tiny boots, and a little girl, Lilibet, as the caption claimed, clutching a toy rabbit. Doria Ragland stood off to one side, smiling faintly, her calm presence grounding the chaos of the day. Everything seemed normal, almost perfect. But sometimes, perfection is where the cracks start to show. From the very first frame, something felt strange to those who have followed Meghan's public image closely. The tone of her voice, the positioning of the camera, even the color palette, it all seemed too cinematic for a casual family outing. The footage wasn't shot by a friend or on a smartphone. It was professional. The lighting was soft yet deliberate, the depth of field shallow enough to create a sense of intimacy. It was clear someone had planned this moment. Every smile, every glance, every movement looked measured, as though life itself had been rehearsed. But what caught the world's attention wasn't the quality. It was the emotion. Meghan appeared radiant, but Harry's expression told a different story. He smiled for the camera, yes, but his eyes seemed distant, distracted. Observers noticed the way he adjusted his jacket repeatedly, how he looked toward the crew rather than the children. These tiny gestures, so easily overlooked, began to feed suspicion. Something was off, though few could put their finger on it. The camera followed the children as they ran between the pumpkins. Meghan crouched down, helping the little girl lift a small one, while Doria clapped from a few feet away. The moment should have melted hearts. Instead, it invited scrutiny. "They look older than they should," one viewer commented online. "That's not the same Archie from their Christmas photo." The internet pounced. Frame by frame, users began comparing screenshots to older images, and soon the differences became glaring. The boy's hair texture looked slightly different. The girl's face, while similar, had features that didn't quite match previous appearances. Even their heights seemed inconsistent with the reported ages. A frenzy erupted, millions of viewers dissecting every pixel, every angle, every shadow. Within 24 hours, the clip had been shared across every platform imaginable. Hashtags flooded the internet. Hashtag Pumpkin Patch Mystery. Hashtag Borrowed Kids. Hashtag Doria Slip. Influencers began analyzing the video in long-form breakdowns, slowing down the footage to expose inconsistencies. "Look at the hand size," one analyst said. "Look at the way the little girl avoids Meghan's gaze." Others pointed out that Harry barely interacted with either child beyond surface-level gestures. No picking up, no hugs, just staged proximity. In the background, Doria's comment hung like a ghostly echo. "Their parents will be proud." What made that phrase so powerful wasn't just its wording, but its placement. It came at a moment when Meghan and the little girl turned toward the camera, smiling together. Doria's voice drifted in, almost unconsciously. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't directed. It was the kind of natural remark someone makes when they forget a microphone is nearby. And because of that, it hit harder than any headline could. Audiences began to wonder, was she referring to someone else entirely? Did Doria see something the rest of us didn't? News outlets rushed to cover the story. Major entertainment networks debated whether the video was authentic or manipulated. Royal commentators speculated that the footage might have been intended for promotional purposes, perhaps part of a Netflix project. Others argued it was a genuine family moment. But what no one could deny was how meticulously crafted the scene appeared. The soft lighting, the matching earth tone outfits, the slow pan across the field. It all looked like a commercial for domestic bliss. Yet, for those who looked closer, there were fissures beneath the surface. It's important to understand how deeply Meghan controls her public image. Every photograph, every statement, every appearance is filtered through layers of branding. Her media strategy has long been to project relatability while maintaining a veil of mystery. This video was no different. The family appeared spontaneous, but spontaneity doesn't usually come with professional cinematography and perfect sound design. That realization fed a quiet sense of unease among viewers. They weren't watching a candid family memory. They were watching a performance. In the days following the upload, debates intensified. Online forums filled with speculation about who filmed the footage. Some claimed it was part of a documentary shoot that had been scrapped. Others suggested it was leaked accidentally. But what truly fueled the narrative was how quickly the video disappeared. Less than 48 hours after posting, it vanished from official channels, replaced with a shorter, edited version where Doria's voice was muted. No explanation was given. The silence spoke volumes. The deletion triggered a digital treasure hunt. Internet archivists and fan communities raced to re-upload the original footage, claiming it had been censored. Clips surfaced on mirror accounts, some blurred, others restored through AI software. It became a cat-and-mouse game between those trying to preserve the original and those trying to erase it. The more the footage was hidden, the more powerful it became. It wasn't just a video anymore. It was evidence. At the heart of the storm was Doria Ragland herself. Until this moment, she had maintained a quiet dignity, rarely speaking publicly about her daughter's life. She was seen as the stabilizing force, the calm in Meghan's whirlwind. Her accidental remark shattered that image. Reporters camped outside her Los Angeles home, begging for clarification. Friends close to her claimed she was overwhelmed, insisting it had been a misunderstanding. But others weren't so sure. They described tension between Doria and Meghan in the days following the incident, whispers of late-night phone calls and frantic attempts to contain the fallout. One source claimed Doria felt caught in something she never meant to reveal. Meanwhile, the online conversation evolved from curiosity to investigation. Viewers began comparing Doria's interactions with the children in other clips. In older footage, she seemed affectionate, grandmotherly. In this one, however, she maintained a noticeable distance. Her body language was polite but detached. She never picked up the children, never bent to their level. Psychologists analyzing the clip suggested that her subconscious might have betrayed her. If she didn't perceive them as her real grandchildren, her mind would naturally avoid certain gestures of intimacy. It was a subtle detail, but in the context of her remark, it felt significant. Harry and Meghan's PR team went into immediate crisis mode. Anonymous insiders reported internal discussions about narrative correction. Statements were drafted, then scrapped. The couple reportedly feared that addressing the clip directly would only legitimize conspiracy theories. Instead, they chose silence, hoping the news cycle would move on. But silence has its own gravity. When public figures known for oversharing suddenly withhold comment, it creates an even louder echo. People began to interpret their quiet as confirmation. Royal experts seized the moment. Longtime commentators recalled similar controversies surrounding the couple's previous media ventures. They referenced inconsistencies in baby photographs, the secrecy around birth certificates, and the lack of verifiable images of Lilibet for nearly 2 years. Suddenly, every old question resurfaced, reframed by this new piece of evidence. The narrative began to shift from rumor to pattern. The pumpkin patch video, meant to show family unity, became the most dissected piece of footage in modern celebrity history. Every detail, the way Meghan adjusted her hair, the momentary flicker of discomfort on Harry's face, the slightly awkward positioning of the children, was studied like a crime scene. Viewers weren't content with surface explanations anymore. They wanted answers, and as those answers failed to come, imagination filled the void. Some argued that Meghan had used the video to promote an image of motherhood as part of her upcoming media projects. Others believed it was an attempt to humanize her family after a string of negative headlines. But the more polished the footage appeared, the less authentic it felt. That paradox became the foundation of the entire controversy. The pursuit of sincerity through performance. People could sense the disconnect, even if they couldn't articulate it. By the time the dust began to settle, it was too late. The internet had already drawn its conclusions. What began as a harmless family outing had transformed into a global debate about truth, deception, and the blurred lines between personal life and publicity. The pumpkin patch, once a symbol of innocence, had become a metaphor for something deeper. A field of appearances, cultivated and controlled, where even love could be curated for an audience. And yet, amid all the chaos, one question remained unanswered. What did Doria truly mean? Did she simply misspeak, referring to their parents in a casual, offhand way? Or had she inadvertently confirmed something much larger? Something that had been hidden in plain sight all along? As the world prepared to move on to the next scandal, that question lingered, stubborn and unresolved. It was the seed from which the rest of this investigation would grow. Because once doubt takes root, it doesn't fade easily. It demands light, and sooner or later it finds a way to surface. But perhaps the most haunting part of the clip wasn't the words themselves. It was what came after. As Doria finished speaking, there was a moment of silence. The children continued to play. Meghan smiled, but her shoulders stiffened. Harry, standing a few feet away, looked at her briefly, then turned toward the horizon. He said nothing. It was a single, fleeting look, but those who studied the footage called it telling. A look of recognition, maybe resignation. As if he knew the damage was done. Public relations experts later noted how unusual it was for Meghan and Harry to leave the moment unaddressed. Normally, they'd use such controversies to craft sympathetic narratives, releasing statements about misinterpretations or toxic media culture. This time, they said nothing. Silence became their only response, and that silence grew louder with each passing day. Doria's remark, 6 words long, had become the pivot point of a story much larger than anyone anticipated. It peeled back the polished surface of the Sussex brand and exposed the fragility underneath. It showed how one sentence could undo years of image management, how authenticity built on control can collapse with a single breath. Whether she intended it or not, Doria Ragland had set off a chain reaction that no amount of PR could contain. And so the world began to ask questions that wouldn't go away. Who were the children in the video? Why did Meghan's team react with such urgency? What truths were hiding behind their silence? The clip had become a mirror, one that reflected not just the family on camera, but the uneasy relationship between fame, image, and truth itself. By the time the storm began to calm, the damage had already been done. Doria withdrew entirely from public appearances. Meghan retreated from social media for several weeks. But curiosity never fades, it only changes shape. The more they hid, the deeper people dug. And somewhere beneath the noise, one truth lingered like a shadow across every frame. Sometimes the smallest words reveal the biggest secrets. The timeline was supposed to make sense. That's what every good narrative relies on, consistency. But when people began to dig into the details surrounding the pumpkin patch video, the dates didn't line up. What was marketed as a casual fall outing in early October quickly unraveled into a sequence of contradictions that left even the most loyal supporters scratching their heads. Somewhere between the official story and the recorded facts, something didn't add up. The original upload of the pumpkin picking video came with a caption that read, October 14th, Family Memories. The date was simple, harmless, but digital footprints tell their own stories. Within days, data analysts began pulling metadata from the video file before it was taken down. What they found immediately raised red flags. The timestamp embedded in the file revealed a creation date nearly 2 weeks earlier, September 30th. That alone wouldn't have meant much if not for the fact that Meghan and Harry were confirmed to be attending a charity gala in Los Angeles that very evening. Photos from the event showed them dressed in black tie attire, far removed from the denim and flannel of the supposed family day. So, if the footage wasn't filmed when it was claimed to be, what else about it was inaccurate? Independent investigators began mapping out the Sussexes' known public appearances during that period. On the weekend the video was allegedly shot, The family was photographed arriving at a private airport in Santa Barbara. Yet, the background of the pumpkin patch clearly showed autumn leaves and pumpkin vines, visual cues that don't match the dry Californian landscape of that specific week. Meteorologists even pointed out that the lighting and cloud cover in the footage resembled early September, not mid-October. That kind of detail might seem trivial, but when pieced together, it painted a different picture. This wasn't a spontaneous outing. It was a production, carefully filmed weeks in advance and later presented as something it wasn't. Reporters from multiple outlets tried to obtain confirmation from the pumpkin patch itself, a popular local farm that frequently hosts celebrity families. The management refused to comment, citing privacy agreements. That response only deepened the intrigue. One anonymous employee eventually spoke under condition of anonymity, saying, "They weren't there that day. We would have known. Everyone knows when Meghan Markle visits anywhere." He went on to suggest that private arrangements may have been made for filming on an earlier, unpublicized date, when the farm was closed to the public. This revelation pushed online communities into overdrive. Users began creating visual comparisons between the video and real-time satellite imagery of the location. Small details, shadows, fence placements, even the pattern of the hay bales, didn't match. There was also a glaring absence of background noise typically associated with open farms during operating hours. No crowd chatter, no ambient music, no rustling from other families. It was eerily quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence you only get when a set is closed and controlled. Then came the revelation that truly shook the story apart. A volunteer from a local wildlife charity posted an archived newsletter showing that Harry and Meghan had attended an environmental conference on the exact weekend they claimed to be at the pumpkin patch. The conference, held in Santa Barbara, included several photo opportunities with attendees. That left no room for ambiguity. They couldn't have been in both places at once. Either the footage had been filmed on a different date, or someone had gone to great lengths to make it appear otherwise. Forensic video analysts began dissecting the clip frame by frame. They examined everything from the direction of shadows to the coloration of leaves. Their findings were damning. In one section of the video, the sun's angle indicated early afternoon. In another, the light had shifted dramatically, suggesting that the footage was shot over multiple days and edited together to look continuous. Even the children's clothing appeared inconsistent upon close inspection. Minor differences in patterns, slight color shifts that might not catch the casual viewer's eye but stood out starkly to professionals. The inconsistencies didn't stop there. Observers began cross-referencing the children's appearances with past photos. Archie, reportedly 5 years old at the time, appeared taller and more mature in the video than in images taken only a month earlier. Lilibet, too, seemed slightly older than expected, with features that some insisted didn't quite match earlier portraits. Online communities began to connect the dots, forming a theory that grew darker with each revelation. If the footage wasn't recent, and if the children looked different, could it be that they weren't the same children at all? Public interest spiked once more when a leaked internal email allegedly from a PR firm tied to Meghan's team surfaced online. It referenced footage management and re-upload coordination for family content, and mentioned a timeline correction. The authenticity of the email was never verified, but its phrasing struck a nerve. What exactly did timeline correction mean? Was it an innocent adjustment for continuity, or a euphemism for fabrication? Meanwhile, those close to the Sussex circle began distancing themselves. Collaborators who had once worked on joint projects quietly removed references to them from social media. A filmmaker who had reportedly helped with previous promotional shoots gave a cryptic comment to a journalist, saying, "Not everything the public sees is in the right order. Let's leave it at that." The statement was vague but resonant. It aligned perfectly with the growing narrative that the Sussex story was not linear but staged. The palace, while maintaining its silence, was reportedly watching closely. Sources familiar with royal communications claimed that senior aides had compiled a dossier of inconsistencies regarding Meghan and Harry's media releases. Though it was never made public, insiders hinted that it contained chronological discrepancies in multiple official statements. For a family that thrives on precision and protocol, such irregularities weren't just embarrassing. they were potentially scandalous. Social media became the new battleground for truth. Amateur investigators posted side-by-side comparisons of Harry's beard length, Meghan's hairstyle, and the state of the pumpkin patch foliage. Everything pointed toward a timeline that simply didn't make sense. One viral post summed it up perfectly. "This isn't a family video. It's a montage of moments stitched together to look like one day." Psychological analysts later commented on the deeper implications of these discoveries. When a public figure manipulates their timeline, one expert explained, it's not merely a matter of optics. It's a method of narrative control. They reshape time to fit the story they want the audience to believe. That statement struck a chord with millions. If Meghan and Harry were indeed altering timelines, what was the purpose? To protect privacy? To maintain illusion? Or to obscure something far more complex? As attention intensified, Meghan's team reportedly reached out to social media platforms requesting removal of videos and posts alleging timeline fraud. But again, the effort backfired. Once people feel they're being censored, curiosity turns to obsession. Dozens of YouTubers launched long-form exposés, some reaching millions of views, carefully outlining how the timeline didn't just appear inconsistent, it looked deliberate. At the same time, insiders from Montecito described a shift in mood around the couple. Where there had once been open smiles and carefully timed media drops, there was now paranoia. Sources described late-night strategy calls, tightened circles, and a growing sense that control was slipping. The pumpkin patch video, meant to portray harmony, had exposed fractures both within the family and in their carefully managed image. By the time major outlets like The Guardian and Page 6 began hinting at a chronology controversy, the damage was irreversible. The narrative had escaped the confines of gossip. It had become an investigation, and for Meghan and Harry, every future video or photograph would now be measured against one impossible standard: truth. In the end, the inconsistencies weren't just about dates or shadows. They symbolized something much larger: the erosion of credibility. A single misstep in time can unravel an entire story. The moment the timeline broke, so did the illusion of authenticity. From that point forward, every smiling image, every heartfelt caption, every glimpse into their private life would be seen not as reality, but as rehearsal. And as analysts continued to piece together the puzzle, one haunting question loomed. If the day at the pumpkin patch wasn't what it seemed, what else in the Sussex narrative had been rewritten? For years, Meghan Markle has been known as more than just an actress, a duchess, or a public figure. She has been known as a master of narrative control. Long before the royal titles and global fame, Meghan understood that power in the modern world isn't about lineage or wealth. It's about story. And when it came to crafting hers, she learned how to wield it like a weapon. The pumpkin patch video wasn't the first time she blurred the line between reality and performance. It was simply the most visible crack in a pattern that had been forming for years. Back in her Suits days, Meghan was meticulous about her public image. Former cast members often spoke about her discipline, how she managed her social media presence like a brand, not a personal account. Every post was calculated, every quote perfectly polished. She wasn't reckless or impulsive online. She was deliberate. Even then, she seemed to understand that one well-timed image could generate more goodwill than an entire press tour. When she entered royal life, that instinct didn't disappear. It evolved into something far more sophisticated and far more dangerous. When Meghan first joined the royal family, she faced an unprecedented level of attention. Cameras followed her every move, and headlines multiplied overnight. At first, she seemed to embrace it, playing the role of a modern duchess redefining tradition. But the moment she realized that the media could not be controlled from within, she chose a different route. She built her own media. That decision marked the beginning of her transformation from royal figure to independent narrative architect. Her first major act of narrative control came with her and Harry's departure from royal duties. Rather than allow the palace to dictate the tone of the announcement, Meghan and Harry preemptively published their own statement. They framed their exit not as rebellion, but as empowerment. Within minutes of the palace's response, their version of events had already gone viral. It was a media masterstroke, a lesson in how to dominate the information cycle by acting first and fast. But beneath that brilliance lay a telling pattern. Meghan didn't just want to influence the story. She wanted to own it entirely. That same pattern appeared again in their interview with Oprah Winfrey. The world expected vulnerability. Meghan delivered performance. Every gesture, every pause, every tear was calibrated to communicate both pain and strength. Viewers felt empathy, yes, but media analysts later noted how seamlessly the narrative aligned with Meghan's ongoing rebranding effort. In that interview, she didn't just tell her truth. She restructured the public's memory of events. And for a while, it worked. She became the misunderstood heroine, the victim of an outdated institution, the woman who had spoken truth to power. But the problem with constructing an image that relies on perfection is that it leaves no room for mistakes. Each public moment has to reinforce the illusion. That's why the pumpkin patch video was so crucial and so dangerous. It wasn't just a family outing. It was another entry in the long line of curated moments meant to remind the world that Meghan had it all under control. Yet, like a house of cards, one misplaced piece can cause the entire structure to collapse. Public relations professionals who've worked in Hollywood recognize Meghan's tactics instantly. She doesn't release media content reactively. She releases it strategically, often in response to something else. When negative press surfaces, she posts something wholesome. When rumors grow louder, she produces an image of calm domestic life. It's a rhythm that has repeated itself for years. A new controversy emerges. Then suddenly, there's a photo of Archie feeding chickens, a shot of Lilibet in a garden, or a video of Harry smiling through family time. But over time, the pattern became predictable, and predictability is the enemy of authenticity. Behind the scenes, former aides have described the pressure that comes with that level of control. According to several accounts, Meghan demanded that every image released to the public go through multiple rounds of review. Lighting, posture, even the color tones of photographs were adjusted until they met her approval. One source recalled how she once ordered a set of photos res-hot because her smile looked too rehearsed. Another mentioned that she kept a personal log of how each appearance was received online, tracking which photos generated positive sentiment and which ones didn't. It wasn't vanity, it was strategy. The need for control extended beyond her personal image. Meghan reportedly maintained final approval over the couple's joint public statements, charity press releases, and even minor social media posts. Staff described endless edits, rewritten drafts, and sudden reversals if something didn't fit the image she wanted. At times, this obsession with perfection caused friction between Meghan and Harry's team. While Harry preferred spontaneity, Meghan sought precision. Every word had to align with her vision of who they were, or perhaps more accurately, who she wanted them to be. Critics began referring to Meghan's world as a brand bubble, a carefully managed ecosystem designed to shield her from external criticism. Her inner circle, tightly curated, consisted mostly of those who shared her narrative goals. Even those who disagreed rarely lasted long. Over time, this insulated environment became both her greatest strength and her greatest vulnerability. It allowed her to control what the world saw, but it also separated her from what the world truly felt. Media analysts call this phenomenon narrative fatigue. When an audience senses manipulation, even subtle, emotional disconnection follows. Meghan's relentless need to perfect her story began to produce diminishing returns. Each new appearance was greeted with skepticism. Each authentic moment felt rehearsed. The very control that had once made her powerful now made her appear artificial. The turning point came when contradictions between her words and visuals started to surface. Photographs meant to show simplicity revealed luxury in the background. Statements about privacy clashed with professionally filmed documentaries. And the more she insisted on being genuine, the more the public noticed how heavily produced everything seemed. It's a paradox that has haunted every celebrity who builds a career on transparency. When your authenticity becomes your brand, it stops feeling authentic. The pumpkin patch video fit perfectly into this pattern. Every frame reflected the same hallmarks: soft lighting, polished imagery, and the illusion of spontaneity. But unlike previous instances, This one didn't survive public scrutiny. When Doria's slip shattered the illusion, it exposed the entire machinery behind it. The audience wasn't just questioning the footage, they were questioning the philosophy behind it. Experts in media psychology began analyzing why Meghan's control tactics backfired this time. One researcher explained that constant narrative control creates emotional distance between the storyteller and the audience. People connect to vulnerability, he said, but when everything feels curated, even the truth sounds like marketing. The pumpkin patch footage was supposed to bridge that emotional gap. It was meant to make her relatable again. Instead, it reminded people of how far removed she'd become from the natural chaos of real life. Even Meghan's defenders started struggling to justify her choices. Journalists who had once praised her for challenging the royal establishment now admitted that her story felt overproduced. Some insiders described an atmosphere of frustration around her. She doesn't trust anyone to tell the story right, one former staff member said. It's not enough for her to be liked. She needs to be believed. That hunger for control, experts say, often leads public figures into dangerous territory. When you begin manipulating timelines, editing language, and staging authenticity, it becomes difficult to separate performance from reality. The moment that line blurs, even the most genuine acts appear suspicious. In Meghan's case, the consequence was devastating. The very skill that had propelled her into global fame now became the reason people stopped believing her. And that disbelief didn't stay confined to the pumpkin patch. Old controversies resurfaced with renewed strength. The inconsistencies in birth certificates, the rumors about staged photos, the missing details around christenings. Every unanswered question returned to haunt her narrative. It was as if the entire history of her media control had condensed into one moment of reckoning. An independent report by a well-known digital forensics lab confirmed that several frames showed inconsistencies between lighting angles and shadows. In one still, the sun illuminated Meghan's face from the left. In another, the same position produced a shadow on the opposite side. To the naked eye, it looked seamless. But under the scrutiny of pixel analysis, the inconsistencies were glaring. The report concluded that the footage had likely been stitched together from multiple takes, shot at different times, possibly even at different locations, and later blended to appear continuous. This kind of editing, the experts explained, isn't uncommon in commercial work. But for a supposedly candid family moment, it raised serious questions. Audio experts soon joined the conversation. They isolated the background sounds, wind, footsteps, laughter, and discovered peculiar audio artifacts. The wind noise looped identically every 12 seconds, suggesting a layered sound bed rather than live recording. Children's laughter also repeated faintly at near-perfect intervals, an unnatural rhythm that hinted at post-production mixing. One professional audio engineer summarized it plainly. The sound environment is artificial. This wasn't a single take. It's a composite. Then came the behavioral experts. A group of child development specialists reviewed the footage and noticed subtleties in how the children interacted with Meghan and Harry. The little boy, identified as Archie, rarely looked directly at Meghan. When she reached for his hand, he hesitated before taking it. The girl, supposedly Lilibet, kept glancing at the camera crew more often than at her parents. Children usually seek reassurance from their primary caregivers in unfamiliar settings, one child psychologist observed. These children behaved as though they were following direction, not bonding naturally. Another expert added, their body language is cautious, detached. It doesn't read as a spontaneous family dynamic. That observation set off another wave of analysis. Viewers began focusing on Harry's interactions, or rather, his lack thereof. In every scene, he seemed distant. He spoke very little, his smiles mechanical, his gestures stiff. In one moment, as Meghan leaned down to adjust the little girl's hat, Harry's gaze shifted toward the camera, and he appeared to sigh. Lip readers later suggested he mouthed the word enough. Whether true or misinterpreted, that single frame ignited weeks of debate about whether Harry had grown disillusioned with the performance his life had become. As the footage continued to circulate, artificial intelligence researchers ran the video through facial comparison algorithms using archival images of Archie and Lilibet. The results shocked even those who expected anomalies. The algorithm identified moderate probability mismatches in key facial ratios, ear placement, eye distance, and jaw alignment. When compared to confirmed photographs of the children taken months earlier, the findings didn't definitively prove impersonation, but they didn't disprove it either. The children in this video show measurable deviation from prior biometric profiles. The report read, "The differences could be due to age progression, but the degree of variance exceeds expected norms." Suddenly, the idea that the video might have featured doubles or borrowed kids, as social media dubbed them, didn't seem so far-fetched. The term caught fire online, fueling endless threads and discussions. Even skeptics admitted that the level of production value in the footage made the theory plausible. Why would a simple family outing require editing, reshoots, and synthetic audio unless there was something or someone to conceal? A body language specialist added another layer of intrigue. She analyzed Meghan's micro-expressions throughout the clip and described a pattern of what she called controlled anxiety. Every time Meghan touched one of the children, her smile tightened. Her hands adjusted their clothing unnecessarily, as though rehearsing contact rather than offering affection. Her gestures are polished, the expert explained, but they lack emotional depth. It's what you see when someone is trying to project love rather than feel it. Forensic photographers also pointed out inconsistencies in the reflections captured on glass surfaces in the background. In one frame, the reflection of a camera operator could be faintly seen. In another, that reflection vanished entirely even though the angle hadn't changed. That suggested the use of green screens or digital overlays to mask elements of the original environment. "The editing is professional," one photographer said, "but not flawless. Someone was trying very hard to make this look natural." By this point, the evidence had grown too technical for casual dismissal. Major news outlets began commissioning their own analyses. A British media watchdog confirmed that the version of the video released by Meghan's team had been digitally processed more than once. According to their internal investigation, the footage had passed through at least 2 separate production suites before going live. Their statement was cautious but clear. "This is not a raw video. It is a compiled and edited visual asset." While experts debated the technical aspects, psychologists turned to the emotional consequences. One specialist in media perception explained that audiences feel betrayed when authenticity turns out to be an illusion. "The emotional damage isn't just to the subject's reputation," she said. "It undermines the audience's trust in their own judgment. They start questioning everything they've seen before." And that was precisely what happened. Every previous video, every photograph, every story Meghan had told about motherhood was suddenly placed under suspicion. Social media researchers noted an unprecedented surge in video breakdowns. TikTok and YouTube became battlegrounds of interpretation, with users producing amateur analyses of their own. Some slowed the footage to catch hidden edits. Others compared stills of the children's faces to those of known family friends' kids. The line between investigation and obsession blurred, but the conclusion most viewers drew was the same. Something wasn't right. Even Meghan's defenders struggled to explain the technical irregularities. A few suggested the video was heavily edited simply to protect the children's privacy. Others theorized that compression artifacts created false impressions. But those explanations collapsed when independent labs confirmed the alterations were not random but deliberate. One visual technician stated bluntly, "The changes weren't about privacy, they were about continuity. Someone tried to maintain an illusion." Then there was the question of motive. Why would Meghan go to such lengths to manipulate what should have been a simple family moment? The most common theory was that the footage was part of a larger media plan, a coordinated effort to rebuild the couple's image ahead of new business ventures. The release of the video had coincided perfectly with renewed talks about upcoming projects tied to streaming platforms and book deals. A consultant who had worked with celebrity PR teams explained the logic. When a public figure faces sustained negative press, a family-focused video humanizes them. It resets the narrative. But if the video backfires, the damage is 10 times worse. As the weeks passed, More experts chimed in, each with their own findings. Lighting engineers noted that the shadows in the video didn't match the reported time of day. Costume analysts pointed out that Meghan's plaid shirt was the same one she'd worn in a completely different event several months prior, suggesting recycled wardrobe for continuity. Data analysts even traced digital fingerprints that linked the raw file to a media company in Santa Monica that had previously worked with the couple on branded content. Each discovery layered the story with more complexity, more contradiction, more unease. By the end of the investigation phase, one thing had become clear to anyone paying attention. The pumpkin patch video wasn't what it appeared to be. Whether it was an elaborate PR stunt, a mishandled production, or something more calculated, the experts agreed that it had been manufactured to evoke emotion rather than capture reality. And once that conclusion spread, the trust Meghan and Harry had worked so hard to rebuild began to erode faster than any public statement could repair it. The experts had turned over every stone, dissected every second, and still, the most haunting question remained unanswered. If the video was altered, what was being hidden? Theories abounded: doubles, surrogates, secret filming, but the truth remained out of reach. What was undeniable, however, was that Doria's quiet comment had exposed a domino effect that no one could stop. The illusion had been broken, and in its place stood a harsh reflection of how far imagemakers would go to preserve a story. The calm streets of Montecito had always offered the Sussexes what no palace ever could: distance. Tucked behind manicured hedges and high gates, the family's sprawling estate was a world apart from the tabloids and tourists. For years, neighbors respected that distance, keeping quiet about what they saw or didn't see. But after the pumpkin patch video surfaced and Doria Ragland's words ignited global scrutiny, that silence began to fracture. People who once spoke only in whispers started sharing observations, off the record at first, then publicly. They hadn't planned to become part of a media storm, but the story seemed to find them. One neighbor, an older woman who lived across the hillside, was the first to speak to a local reporter. She described how the neighborhood had grown used to security patrols and tinted vehicles moving in and out of the Sussex property. But something about those routines, she said, never felt consistent. Some weeks, you'd see children playing by the back garden, she explained. Then suddenly, months would go by, and there wouldn't be a sound. Her tone wasn't accusatory, just bewildered. You expect a certain rhythm with families. There was no rhythm there, just appearances. Her words matched what others soon confirmed. A few residents recalled that in the months leading up to the release of the video, the estate had hosted several unmarked vans, usually arriving early in the morning and leaving before midday. They assumed it was part of a renovation project or perhaps staff turnover. Only later did one neighbor connect the timing with the reported filming dates for Meghan's various family-focused productions. You could hear faint laughter, a few children's voices, he said, but they never stayed long. It felt like scenes, not playtime. When journalists pressed further, a small pattern emerged, an unusual rotation of visitors that coincided with Meghan and Harry's public absences. Delivery staff spoke of drop-offs labeled props and personal items. Nothing out of the ordinary, yet always collected within hours. The security detail was polite but firm, discouraging conversation, refusing to let outsiders linger. To the locals, it wasn't scandalous at first. Montecito is filled with private figures. But once the pumpkin patch controversy erupted, every detail became a clue. A gardener who had occasionally worked on properties near the Sussex residence shared a recollection that startled even experienced reporters. He said that sometime late in the summer, he had seen two little ones arrive with a group of adults he didn't recognize. They looked tired, not scared, just out of place, he said. They went inside through the side gate. I didn't see them again after that day. When asked if they could have been Archie and Lilibet, he hesitated. Maybe, he replied, but the ages didn't seem right. The boy was taller than I remembered from photos. This claim might have been dismissed as misremembered observation if it hadn't been echoed by others. A housekeeper from a nearby estate mentioned that she'd occasionally hear children laughing near the Sussex fence line, but always different voices. It's strange, she said quietly. You recognize the sound of kids when you hear them often. These weren't the same kids every time. Then came the report from a driver who handled occasional transport services in the area. He claimed that one of his colleagues had been asked, through an intermediary, to provide a vehicle for a private family shoot. The request included specifications for tinted windows and a child safety setup. The driver said the arrangement seemed overly cautious for a local errand. They made us sign non-disclosure agreements before we even knew who it was for, he explained. We delivered the car, waited for instructions, and then were told the job was cancelled. What these stories had in common wasn't certainty, it was unease. People couldn't say exactly what was happening behind the gates, but they sensed that something about the family dynamic didn't fit the picture painted online. Residents began whispering among themselves at local cafes and charity events. Some dismissed the rumors as exaggeration. Others believed they were witnessing a carefully managed illusion unraveling in real time. The intrigue deepened when a nearby security contractor, who occasionally supplemented the Sussex team, anonymously confirmed that their estate followed unusually strict confidentiality protocols. Most high-profile clients have standard rules, he said. No phones on the property, limited access. But here they changed the roster constantly. Guards rotated weekly, cameras were restricted to external zones, and there were periods when interior access was completely off-limits, even for regular staff. When asked why, he simply replied, "They didn't want anyone recording the wrong moment." Journalists trying to verify these claims found themselves stonewalled. Representatives for Meghan and Harry dismissed the accounts as fabrications. Yet, as one investigator noted, the sheer number of similar statements suggested coordination rather than coincidence. When 3 or 4 unrelated sources describe the same unusual pattern, it's hard to ignore, he said. The local community began to fracture under the attention. Some residents resented the intrusion, accusing reporters of harassing a family just trying to live in peace. Others, particularly those who had once admired Meghan's image, felt disillusioned. "We believed in her story," one resident said. "We thought she was bringing something good here, charity, kindness, openness. Now it feels like there's something else behind it all." A few months after the controversy began, one family who lived adjacent to the Sussex estate decided to install their own security cameras after noticing repeated nighttime activity near the property line. They didn't share footage publicly, but an associate revealed that it captured unusual comings and goings. Vehicles without license plates, equipment cases, and individuals arriving with children, staying briefly, then leaving before dawn. Though the authenticity of these accounts was never formally confirmed, the rumor added another layer to the growing mythology around the house on the hill. Meanwhile, a local cafe owner recalled an encounter with Doria Ragland herself. "She came in one morning early, before the place got busy," he said. "Ordered tea, sat near the window. She seemed distracted. When I asked how the family was, she smiled politely and said, 'They're good, busy as ever.' But then she added something odd. 'Sometimes I think it's too much pretending.' I didn't understand what she meant at the time. Now I wonder." By the time the international press descended on Montecito, many locals regretted ever speaking. The quiet coastal town had become a magnet for speculation, drones, and drive-by gawkers hoping to catch a glimpse of the most talked-about family in the world. For the Sussexes, who had sought refuge from scrutiny, the irony was cruel. Their fortress of privacy had become the epicenter of intrigue. Yet, the accounts continued to multiply. A delivery worker who serviced multiple estates mentioned a peculiar instruction he'd received one afternoon. "They told me to leave the boxes by the gate and not to ring the bell because the kids were filming," he said. "I could hear voices, but they didn't sound like little ones. They sounded like crew members giving directions." Another described a scene he'd witnessed weeks later. Someone was holding a child in front of the house, taking pictures while another person adjusted lighting equipment. It looked like a photo shoot, not a family moment. All these testimonies, while fragmented and unverified, contributed to a narrative that refused to die. They painted a picture not of a peaceful family retreat, but of a meticulously stage-managed operation. One where every sound, sight, and appearance was part of an ongoing production. By early winter, the community's patience wore thin. Residents complained that the neighborhood's once tranquil charm had vanished, replaced by the constant hum of curiosity. Yet no one could deny what they'd seen or not seen. Months had passed since anyone in Montecito could confidently say they'd spotted the Sussex children outdoors. Some locals began joking darkly that the only place the kids seemed to exist was on camera. Behind the jokes, though, was discomfort. People don't like feeling complicit in something they don't understand. The longer the mystery persisted, the more unease settled over the quiet hills. When questioned about it, one longtime resident summed up the sentiment best: "I don't know what's real anymore. Maybe they're just private. Maybe we're all imagining things. But I do know this. Families don't usually have to work this hard to look happy." And that, perhaps, was the most telling observation of all. For the neighbors of Montecito, truth didn't need to be proven in court or dissected by experts. It was felt in the rhythm of daily life. The sounds that came and went, the people who arrived and vanished, the laughter that sometimes echoed where it shouldn't. In those quiet, unguarded moments, the illusion flickered. And once that flicker is seen, it can never truly be unseen. The world rarely sees the inner workings of a celebrity household, and the Sussex estate was no exception. Staff members, long accustomed to strict rules, found themselves navigating a delicate balance between service and secrecy. Some were loyal, some anxious, and some quietly observant. When Doria Ragland's words leaked and ignited a global debate over the pumpkin patch footage, a few former employees began sharing what they'd seen and heard. Small whispers that hinted at a reality far more complex than the public had ever imagined. One housekeeper, who requested anonymity, recalled early mornings when children would arrive accompanied by unfamiliar adults. "They didn't seem like regular visitors," she said. "We were told they were family friends or part of a small private gathering, but the way they were managed, it felt like a set. Everything had to be perfect. Timing, positioning, even which way the kids walked." The staff member emphasized that no one outside the immediate circle ever had unrestricted access. There were always cameras. There were always monitors. You didn't move a step without someone watching. Another insider, a former nanny, provided even more detail. She described a pattern where children, sometimes the same ones, sometimes not, were rotated depending on the scene being filmed. "I would come in to assist with morning care," she explained. "Sometimes there were two little ones I'd never met before."